Hi, Honest Discussioner here. This is a response to Jack, Together for Peace, on his reading of Norman Malcolm's essay on Anselm's ontological argument. I think I'm pronouncing that right. How you doing, Jack? I hope you're well. Let's get started, though. I have to say, Jack, of all the logical arguments for the existence of God, the cosmological, the teleological, I find the ontological argument, at least this version, to be the weakest and least convincing for a number of reasons. The problem with the ontological argument is that it really just presupposes pretty much every premise it has. Now, first off, when you say that God is a being of which no greater can be conceived, that has a few flaws. First, while there is a greatest, there is a strongest person, to use your example, that greatest or strongest person or being is not necessarily the strongest or greatest possible being that could exist. You use the example of someone named Bob being the strongest man in the world, but that doesn't mean that Bob couldn't become stronger one day or that someone could surpass his strength, even though for a time he was the strongest. Now, also, even if it's possible that he could become stronger than he is, or that someone else could surpass him, that doesn't mean that they actually will achieve that possibility. So let's say the strongest person in the world may right now be able to lift 1,000 pounds above their head. That doesn't mean that it's impossible that they or someone else could one day lift 1,001 pounds above their head. In other words, if the human capacity for lifting weight is 1,500 pounds, that doesn't mean there's actually someone who can lift 1,500 pounds or that there ever will be. So perhaps there is a being out there that is greater than all others, but that doesn't mean that it couldn't be greater than it is. Thusly, the greatest possible being does not have to exist. Therefore, a being with the properties you mention does not have to exist. See, this argument also gives way too much credence to concepts and abstracts. Having a concept of something is not the same as having the thing actually existing. Existing as a concept does not mean that it exists in reality with the properties it's conceived to have. You can never use our ability or inability to conceptualize something as evidence for a certain type of reality. Often throughout history, people have believed certain things to be not conceivable that today some people actually can conceive, such as like extra dimensions for space. You also blankly presuppose a God in order to prove God, saying God being the greatest of all beings, God being that which a greater cannot be conceived, means God is not dependent. And now here's the thing, Jack. You're using an argument to try to show that God exists, or that his non-existence is logically impossible. And what you just did with the argument here is claim God exists and give him properties so that you can prove that he exists. Now, you have to prove his existence first, then you can use the properties he supposedly has to base conclusions off of, not the other way around. Maybe you can argue that he's the greatest conception possible, but you haven't established his being yet, so you can't claim there is something with those properties. Again, conceiving of something and having it exist in reality are two completely different things. We're positing there is no God. We're positing that the greatest being conceivable doesn't exist. So before you claim God isn't dependent, you have to first establish that he exists. Until then, you're only using circular logic, which is unfortunately all the ontological argument is. You asked for a script. I'm going to post this on my website, so you can read it in case you'd like to respond. And that's about it. Have a nice day. Honest Discussioner, out.